is a collision course between sources of meaning and sources of knowledge, and our failure to integrate these two as our capacity to develop robust systems of belief has made it so that the erosion of sources of meaning have produced a counterforce where people now lean in too far into corrupt sources of meaning in their effort to fill the void that God used to occupy before he died. But this has now come at the expense of the epistemic component of our existence, and this causes a lot of problems. And we need to find some way to synthesize these two things. We have to find some way to synthesize our respect for truth with our capacity to search for meaning.
Welcome to Conversations with Peter Boghossian. Today I'm speaking with King Crocoduck. He's the creator of the YouTube channel King Crocoduck and a biomedical physicist. We had a very intense discussion about epistemology, meaning, and morality. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the show, Casey. We've never had a Crocoduck before. Could you please tell us about what a Crocoduck is and why you're anonymous?
Sure. So Crocoduck, as you probably know, was an invention of Kirk Cameron's many, many years ago now. This was during the heyday of the internet atheism phenomenon. And he went on live television to argue that evolution can't possibly be true because there is no hybrid of crocodile and duck. And he pulled up this photoshopped image of a duck with a crocodile head.
Right. Right. And so you adapted it. Well, first of all, say why that's false.
Well, ducks and crocodiles,
Sorry to already throw the conversation right into the toilet.
No, you're
idiocy.
Good.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. They come from different branches of the evolutionary tree. There's no reason to expect for the two of them to have this morphing, this fusion that creationists like Kirk Cameron seem to imagine. That's not how it works.
And so that wouldn't be sufficient to falsify evolution, but a Precambrian rabbit would.
I've been told, yeah, bunnies in the Precambrian.
Yep.
Who was it again who said that?
Is it Haldren? J.D. Reed looked that up. Was it J.D. Haldren? Something J.D. Haldren? Okay, so today we are going to have a pretty deep dive conversation about epistemology and about things that are that you've been thinking very, very deeply about for a very, very long time. So what's the little picture here? Let's go little picture to big picture.
All right. Well, the little picture is...
Haldane. Yeah, Haldane was the guy.
Nice.
JB, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the little picture is we want to develop robust beliefs. We want to develop beliefs that are optimally justified. This is the project of epistemology. We don't want to just be making shit up on the fly without, a consistent set of rules to govern the way we come to our beliefs. We want to be able to govern our rule-making process for how we form our beliefs, and ideally in a way that satisfies certain criteria that's of importance to us. And over the years, I've settled upon an understanding of epistemology as well as its etiology in our evolutionary history, that I find very satisfying intellectually, and which I think plays a role. It's going to have to play a part in a bigger picture concerning the other aspects of human existence. The human experience is not limited just to the development of true beliefs. We have a plurality of cognitive modalities. And among those are whatever modalities are responsible for things like the pursuit of meaning, our social relations with other people. And we have to find some way of integrating all of this. So the small picture is identifying the rules by which we can best develop our epistemologies, understand where that came from, and see if there's possibly a way of synthesizing these apparently opposing forces of developing robust beliefs on the one hand and developing robust sources of meaning on the other. Okay,
so I'm going to ask you why people should care about this. Now, so the last time I looked, a quarter of Americans did not know that the Earth revolved around the sun. They thought that the sun revolved around the Earth. So when I ask why people should care about, I'm not talking about them. I'm also not talking about, whatever it was, I can't remember exactly, like the 12% who weren't sure. I'm talking about why should people who live thoughtful, examined lives and want to have a better society care about our conversation today?
Because the society that they're going to leave behind and any children they leave behind are potentially going to have to deal with the consequences of living in a world where people fill the void of meaning with things that are not respectful of truth, or alternatively, people who the other side of the equation as well, people who respect truth but who don't respect sources of meaning, condemning us to a nihilistic existence that ultimately just doesn't end well for anybody. It ends with everyone sitting at home, atomized, isolated, and overdosing on fentanyl.
Oh, like where we are now in Reed's neighborhood. I've taken pictures of people committing social justice on the streets outside. We'll save that for later. Okay, so that's the small picture stuff. Go to the big picture stuff.
That is the big picture. The small picture is just the rules. It's what makes a good epistemology. What are the criteria that we use to evaluate our beliefs, and why this set of criteria as opposed to an alternative set?
Okay. So let's do some foundational questions before we do the deep dive.
All right.
Can epistemology, what's the relationship between epistemology and nihilism?
So the more robust your epistemology, potentially the greater the risk there's going to be of falling into nihilism, because the sources of meaning that we sought out, back in the day before the days of the microprocessor, those sources of meaning are eroded by the contents of our best empirical theories, which say, actually, no, we're not at the center of the universe. Life is not a vitalistic process. The self even is not like this unified thing. It's actually an illusion. There's actually a multiplicity of selves. So, you have to contend with that. A lot of the things that we think are stable and intuitively have historically relied upon as our sources of meaning, as something that we can rest upon and build our lives around. These things are eroded by the contents of our best empirical theories, and our best empirical theories are formed through robust epistemologies. So your epistemology improves. This improves your understanding of the world. Your understanding of the world erodes away at the traditional sources of meaning, and now you're left with a vacuum, and something has to fill that vacuum. This is the nature of the problem as I conceptualize it.
So that's interesting, because it seems that the flip side of the coin is the more robust one's epistemology, and we should probably talk for a moment about what we mean by a robust epistemology. Perhaps you and I mean different things. What do you mean by a robust epistemology?
I mean an epistemology that satisfies a certain set of criteria. In principle, you could make that criteria whatever you want, right? I could say that a robust epistemology is whatever gives me the warm fuzzies. So
okay, so this is interesting to me. So we were using it somewhat differently. So when I use it, I talk about its component as it orients towards truth. Mm-hmm. But that's not how you're because you could have a robust epistemology of like J.R.R. Tolkien's work.
Yeah.
Right. You could have a robust epistemology of some religion, and that would not necessarily lead one to truth, but there'd be not a correspondence theory of truth, but a coherence theory of truth.
I actually lean towards a found-herentist epistemology, a conjunction of both the foundationalist components that we traditionally associate with something like correspondence theory, and the coherentist components of something like, Hegelianism, for example.
Okay, so let me go back to now that we've disambiguated the word. So it seems to me that the flip side of the coin could be the more robust one's epistemology, the less corrosive it is, and the more meaning one would have in one's life. It could also, that's the other side of the coin, isn't it? It would have to be. Not in terms of the erosion of or the corrosion of traditional values that help the society cohere, and perhaps one could argue that there are evolutionary adaptations for that, but in one's own life.
Yeah, I think I see what you're getting at. I think what you're getting at is kind of the solution that I'm trying to drive towards, a synthesis of robust epistemology, something that actually respects truth and is not just whatever gives me the warm fuzzies. but something that satisfies a set of criteria that are non-arbitrary. And on the other hand, something that satisfies what appears to be an innate, evolved human drive to seek out sources of meaning.
So how do we, or if this isn't it, not only this, but if anytime I ask you a question, it's not a good question, just let me know. So how do we fill the vacuum while retaining a robust epistemology?
I think that it begins with an understanding of the mind, an understanding of the evolution of those cognitive modalities that compel us to seek out sources of meaning. I view things like religion and nationalism and other sources of meaning that people hold as technologies. And I want to be able to understand how these technologies work at a functional level, so that we could be able to find something that performs those functions, but actually respects truth while doing so.
I'm going to curveball you now.
All right.
I gave a talk, I think Reed was there, in Sydney last year, and at the Ramsey Center, and I'm pulling from elements of that talk. Is it possible for an alien civilization to develop spacefaring technology without having robust epistemology?
I don't think so.
Tell me, I don't think so either, but tell me why.
Well, to be able to develop robust, spacefaring technology, you have to be able to develop representations of your environment that satisfy certain criteria. These are functional criteria like the ability to predict and explain how the parts are going to behave once you arrange them in a certain way. Explanatory efficiency, so you're not crowding your beliefs of how things work with things that'll potentially gum up the works, so to speak.
Parsimony.
Yeah, as well as consilience. Consilience comes in there as well.
Oh, explain consilience, Wilson's idea.
Yeah, so I'm using it more broadly than Wilson. I understand consilience to mean that the different webs of belief pertaining to different, for lack of a better term, subjects, they're all part of they're all embedded within a broader web of belief that maximizes the degree to which they cohere with each other.
So let me may I ask you another curveball question?
Sure.
I'll throw some curveball questions at you.
Yeah.
Have you ever played Civilization, the game?
I have played Age of Empires. Is that close enough?
I'm not sure. I haven't played the one. Do they have technology trees in there?
Yes.
So this is an epistemological question, although it might not seem like it initially.
Okay.
But let's say that there was another place in this vast universe of ours that had conditions that were virtually identical to this planet. Mm-hmm. And they had beings who are virtually identical to us. Mm-hmm. And let's say that they're at the level of technology that we're currently at. Mm-hmm. Would it be possible for those civilizations to have developed without the wheel?
The wheel specifically,
yes.
I couldn't say. I mean, I could speculate about circumstances under which they develop other technologies. Like, let's say, for example, you have another planet and it's a water surface planet, right?
No, it has to be this, because I'm getting somewhere with this. Okay, let me tell you where I'm going with this.
Okay.
Where I'm going with this is that, let's say that there were trillions, hundreds of trillions of planets like that. Mm-hmm. All you would need is one to have gotten to where we are without wheel technology.
Okay.
And my question to you in terms of, and I'm thinking about this in terms of developing a robust epistemology, and developing a robust epistemology in terms of its instrumental goals, and that is using that to do things in the world, mm-hmm. to make things fly and such.
Right.
Is it possible that we're missing some fundamental piece of technology now that we can't even conceive of?
I think that's a really interesting question. What do you think?
I think so, but I have literally zero evidence since we have an N of one planet. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea. But I think, to me, the reason I asked that question is because epistemology is it's very complicated. And, I do think that there's some interesting intellectual work and Gettier problems and thinking about it, and Goldman has some stuff. But I haven't really seen. I don't know, I just would like it to be more expansive. And I think about the relationship between, that's why I like similar to you, I like the idea of robust epistemologies. That concept I think is really important. And I think that there's something like if you were going to sell someone the idea of why epistemology matters, better life, less likely to be hoodwinked, better technologies, better social advancement.
Not necessarily.
Okay, talk to me.
You get better technologies, but that's not necessarily concomitant with better social advancement, as I think is evident from our current situation.
Explain.
I mean, certainly you can gesture towards certain aspects of society that have improved. You can point to the fact that we don't have slaves anymore. Yeah. You can point to the fact that we don't, any number of things. But you can also point to decreasing levels of happiness, suicide epidemic, drug epidemic. You can point to all kinds of aspects of societal generation and legitimately pose the question of whether the better angels of our nature have actually not also come with their set of demons, have not also been expressed through the conditions of modernity.
Do you think that there's a relationship between having a better, on an individual level, not a social level, that's the next question. You think there's a relationship between an individual who has a robust epistemology and them leading a fulfilling, good life?
I think it's one component. I think that all other things being equal, that there is going to be a correlation. But that asterisk, all other things being equal, it does matter.
Okay.
It's a multivariable problem.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of cover some basic stuff, and
I get you.
For our audience who hasn't gotten an idea of you, I think they have an idea now. Tossing some weird questions at you.
For sure.
So you have the 4-quadrant model. Can you explain that to us? I find that absolutely fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. So I understand the robustness of a theory in terms of 4 criteria, and I just call them the big 4 because why not? I'm not imaginative. Yeah. These criteria, the first one is predictive accuracy and precision. So if my representation of the world says that something is going to happen under a certain set of conditions, is it actually going to do so? And to what degree is that accurate? To what degree is that precise? There's explanatory efficiency, and this criterion conjoins parsimony with consilience. Yeah. We're conjoining Occam's razor to a generalization of E.O. Wilson's idea that expands to all of our webs of knowledge. Optimal flexibility, so finding a middle ground between 2 extremes in terms of our theory's properties. On the one hand, it's not so rigid that it's unresponsive to new lines of evidence that challenge it. But on the other hand, it doesn't consolidate all apparently contradictory lines of evidence and thereby become excessively flexible so as to become non-falsifiable. Yeah. Right? There has to be a happy middle somewhere. And then the 4th criterion is internal consistency. Can we maximize, or I should say minimize, the degree to which there's tension in our network of beliefs?
And what do we do with this? Would you say it's more than the operational criteria of science? It's more than a model, and it's more than a heuristic.
Yeah, I would say that you can think of science as existing. The activity of developing representations of the world. You can think of this activity as existing on a spectrum. The scientist who does this for their job, they adhere to these big 4 operational criteria to the maximum possible degree that their methodologies and their tools and their frameworks allow them to have. But everybody engages in this project to some degree. We have to be able to navigate the world competently if we're going to be able to survive. This holds true not just for scientific theories, but for folk theories. I have a folk theory of your mind. I don't need to be.
My mind is pretty basic, dude. I'm a guy.
Well, you got me there, Peter.
So bracketing my mind, which is very uninteresting at the moment. Food, jujitsu, et cetera. Okay, so the way that you've laid it out, the criteria are not social constructs. Is that correct?
Sorry?
The criteria are not
So you can conjoin social constructs to our developments of representations of the world. Language, for example. Language facilitates the development of improved models because now we can keep records. We can take these representations from our mind. We can write them down. And
mental models.
Exactly. Yeah. Our mental representations, our mental models. They now get stored through some medium. Could be a paper. Could be a drawing. Could be a blueprint on a computer. And now whatever was in your mind, that representation finds itself in other people's minds, and they can collaborate, they can pool resources, they can communicate. You have now more processing power because more brains are involved, and there you go. Now you can have this collaborative effort, and you can develop improved technologies and improved science. At its basis, my argument is that this activity is non-social. All living organisms engage in the development of representations of their environment. The difference is fundamentally a matter of degree.
Okay, I'm just thinking about a dialectic, and I'm thinking about refining those models through communicative contexts. Mm-hmm. And so wouldn't those kind of dialectics be a corrective mechanism, those communicative interactions be a corrective mechanism for one's models?
Certainly. Social constructs can amplify our capacity to develop robust representations of the world, but they don't lie at the basis of it, contrary to what, for example, postmodern critics of science would say.
Let's go there. Okay, so this is a defense against critical constructivist attack on science and robust epistemology.
It is simultaneously a defense against that and an offense, I hope, we could lead into this later, I hope, against the meaning crisis.
Okay, so before we talk about the meaning crisis, I want to talk, just to make sure that we're on the same page. I'm positive we are, but I just want to make sure, and the listeners are clear as well. What do you mean by a social construct?
By social construct, I mean something whose existence is entirely nominal. And not just that, but is a function of social relations. So if we agree, for example, on the alphabet, what letters compose it, what sounds these letters correspond to, then the alphabet exists as a social construct. If we don't agree on that, then the alphabet does not exist as a social construct. It's just some person's idea.
Is sex a social construct?
I don't believe so.
So there's a biological basis for that, and we capture a biological basis in words. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the crisis of meaning. Mm-hmm. Many philosophers and thinkers have been writing about this for quite some time now. What's your take on, explain the crisis of meaning to us, please?
Sure. So traditional sources of meaning, namely religion, but there are also others as well, they've been deteriorating in the wake of the conditions of modernity. These conditions being brought about by improved, more robust epistemologies, the scientific revolution, and the changes to the material and the social conditions as well. This is not to posit like a Marxist dialectic or anything like that. This is just to say that as technology improves, it's going to have, or to put it in civilization terms, as your technology tree, as you like buy more stuff from the technology tree, the way the citizens and the different types of like soldiers or different types of like clerics or whatever types of people you have access to, whatever specialists in your civilization, they change the way that civilization works.
Correct.
Again, not a Marxist point of view here. I'm not saying that this terminates in some utopian synthesis or that it obeys some dialectical structure. I see it more as like a Darwinian thing where you have civilizations
adapting.
I wouldn't say adapting. I would say it's Darwinian in the sense that it's not teleological. It's teleonomical.
Okay, so it has no necessary endpoint.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, and you could have dead ends.
Is hedonism sufficient for meaning?
No.
Why?
Well, when we understand what meaning, the word meaning means to people in the sense of meaning in life, the fundamental thing that you get down to is meaning is that which justifies suffering. If you don't have meaning in your life, then there is no justification for your suffering.
Okay, you just threw me a total curveball. Okay, hold on, I got to process that. Where on earth did the suffering thing come from?
John Vervaeke.
No, I mean, where did it come from in the conversation?
Oh, you were asking me.
You're using Vervaeke's idea of I'm also having run through my head. We had a buddy of mine many years ago, and I went to an Indian restaurant, and the server asked us, "What is the meaning of meaning?" And I was both struck by what an asinine question that was, and simultaneously how profound that was. Mm-hmm. But so I'm familiar with Vervaeke's concept, but explain how it came up just now.
So you're asking me if hedonism is sufficient to address the meaning crisis, and my answer is no.
No. I'm asking you, why can't hedonism itself be a source of meaning?
Hedonism cannot be a source of meaning because it contradicts what I'm claiming to be the meaning of meaning. If meaning is understood in terms of that which justifies your suffering, the absence of suffering would imply an absence of meaning.
But if the absence of suffering implies an absence of meaning, that would only be true by definition. Like, let's say that somebody wakes up and, maybe it's sexual hedonism or food hedonism or
If my conception of the word meaning was just something that popped into my head and okay, here's this thing that I define as meaning, then sure, you could say that all I've done is say that these propositions contradict each other out in my little world of forms. But when I use this word meaning in this sense, I'm referring to the empirical work that has been done to get at what people actually mean by meaning.
So and I just want to make sure I got this right. So you're claiming that meaning has a necessary object. I don't mean something that's ontological, that the object, we know what the object of meaning is because of empirical research when we've asked people what has meaning to them and what gives their life meaning. But all you would need is one person to say, yes, my life meaning was eating as many hot dogs, or I'm Joey Chestnut, consuming as many hot dogs as quickly as possible.
Well, I'm looking at this functionalistically. I'm trying to understand.
You mean numerically?
No, I mean functionally, to take a kind of parallel question. What is the mind? What is cognition? You could try to address that in terms like a metaphysician. The mind is made of this, this, and that. Or you can address it functionalistically, like an empiricist. Yeah. The mind is a thing that does this. It accomplishes that.
Okay.
I address questions in this latter sense because it doesn't commit me to metaphysical propositions that might mislead me. Because at the end of the day, my objective is to achieve certain outcomes. And
what outcomes?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about, for example, understanding the mind, I want to understand what it does, how it goes brrr, so to speak. If in the course of understanding how it goes brrr, it helps to understand its structure, which often is the case, then yeah, I will understand I will make an effort to understand the structure, but only to the degree that it helps me understand how the mind goes brrr.
Okay, so now we've got that. Now relate this to the four quadrants, please.
Well, the four quadrants don't make they allow you to bypass the kind of metaphysical a priorist framework. They allow you to have a functionalistic view of the world. Given such and such representation of how the world works, can I do these four things? Can I achieve predictive accuracy and precision? Can I achieve explanatory efficiency? Can I achieve optimal flexibility? Can I achieve internal consistency? And when I encounter alternative representations of the world that challenge my own, can I use these criteria to assess which one does a better job of adhering to these criteria?
That's fascinating to me. So it gets there's something which I've thought about perhaps more than I should, but even if you have those, you need the attitudinal disposition to accept that, for example, someone else's explanation is more parsimonious or
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so where do we go from here?
Well, from here, but what you raise an important point. There is an underlying value system. There's an axiology.
Correct.
And You have
by necessity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would claim that we do have an inherent axiology. We have multiple competing cognitive modalities, so there are going to be multiple competing axiologies. Sometimes our value to achieve a maximally robust epistemology, it comes into contradiction with other values we might have. Other values that different parts of the brain evolved to facilitate our survival. So, for example, social interaction.
I was just going to say, let's linger on this. So is it possible for one to have an extraordinarily robust epistemology, but just be a son of a bitch?
I've known plenty. You have too, I'm sure.
Yeah. So what's the relationship? First of all, does this relate to moral realism?
That's an interesting question.
Explain moral realism as you see it.
As I understand it, moral realism is the claim that moral propositions are truth-bearing. And I'm a moral quasi-realist.
What's that mean?
It basically means that I think that our moral propositions do bear upon things in the real world, but these things that they bear upon are proxies for other things and not necessarily something that comes from on high.
Okay. So is there a relationship between, and I realize I have to be very careful with the words here, I don't know, being a moral person, being a good person, being a person of virtue. What's the relationship between the moral realm and the epistemological realm?
That is a beautiful question, and it was answered beautifully by a rationalist. I'm an empiricist, but I deeply, deeply respect this rationalist, and it was Spinoza.
I was actually asked that question on my PhD exam, but anyway, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
what did they ask specifically?
They had a bunch of questions. I think it was like a compound question about Spinoza. Yeah, the relationship between morality and epistemology. Mm-hmm. And I think they asked, if I can remember correctly, must one precede the other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Spinoza, in Ethics in Geometrical Order, his magnum opus, he opens, ironically, for a room full of atheists, with with the ontological argument, his version of the ontological argument. But he puts a spin on it.
Yeah.
And this spin is what gets him a very rare excommunication from the Jewish community that he was a part of. And it's a spin in which God is conceptualized as...
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, he adheres to this kind of ultra-monistic view where everything in the universe is the same substance. That substance is God. And everything that appears different is just a different instantiation, a different mode of that substance. And from this, he derives, using Euclidean geometric techniques, his entire system of ethics, how to live, in his view, a blessed life, a virtuous life, a life in which you can have peace, because ultimately this is the point of morality, according to Spinoza, and I agree, which is equanimity, a sense of peace. Virtue is not, contrary to deontologists, I don't think that being moral is a duty that we're bound to, and contrary to the consequentialists, really? I don't think that morality is a function of calculus, of some system of exchanges.
Yeah, that seems obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, I think morality, at the end of the day, it's about, how do I phrase this? It's about living with dignity and dying in peace, which is of interest and importance to everyone, for reasons that I would argue are evolutionary.
You think there are objective reasons to be good?
I wouldn't try to claim that there's an ought you can derive from an is. I would say that it is the case that we all have this incentive we all have this evolutionarily based incentive to live lives of dignity and die in peace. And that if you are interested in adhering to this incentive, whatever your other competing cognitive modalities might try to do to get in your way, then it's going to be in your interest to try to be virtuous.
Do you think, so So I've been, I don't follow this or read up on it too much, but I've been utterly blown away by the advances in AI, like genuinely blown away. And I've been reading some of Nick Bostrom's stuff. Do you think, well, I'm trying to relate this to your model. So is it possible that an extremely sophisticated AI could come up with universal moral rules derivable in such a way that we had not previously considered or understood? In a similar way, and I realize the analogy breaks down, but in a similar way that it has advanced the game of chess or Go?
Not in a similar way, but there's a roundabout way in which the answer is yes.
Okay.
So, my thinking on AI, I'm a lover of Blade Runner. So
Me too. Yeah.
So, I see.
Like Tears in the Rain.
Yeah.
The Tannenhauser Gates. That was one of the greatest. That was improv,
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah. It was the greatest monologue in my opinion.
I completely agree. Okay, so let's go back to the
hold on. What was your question? I feel like it was on the tip of my. Oh, can AI rederive? Yeah. So I would argue that you need to have a causal understanding at this time, an evolutionary understanding of why it is we have certain moral drives, why it is that we seek out certain types of moral activities.
So by drives, you're going to give an evolutionary response to that.
We have to be careful here because we're very easily going to be accused of trying to derive an ought from an is. So David Hume is a hero, but he's often misinterpreted here. Hume did not say that because you can't derive ought from is, you therefore can't say anything about the natural drives and the natural passions that influence our beliefs about morality and about informing our conduct towards each other. Like the whole point of his book was to try to come to some understanding of how we can have a scientifically informed understanding of morality. So I would say that to answer the AI question, I would say that it has to have an empirically grounded understanding of why it is that we behave the way we do, what it is we value, what are the evolutionary reasons for us valuing these things, and from there making recommendations about what we can do to best satisfy these drives.
Yeah, the whole ought from an is thing, I never really understood why. I mean, many thinkers have given examples like John is a barber. John ought to cut your hair.
Yeah.
That's driving an ought from an is. But putting that aside for the moment, okay. So relate the. Okay, now my mind is down the ought from an is rabbit hole. Okay, so relate. That's what often happens. So I love, one of the reasons I'm enjoying this discussion so much is because I never get an opportunity to think about this stuff. I have to think about completely idiotic shit all the time, and so this is very nice to me to.
Happy to clear the air.
Thank you. I appreciate it's like a breath of fresh air for me to actually think about something that's interesting instead of idiotic. Okay, so relate this again back to the models that you had, the 4 models.
Yeah, so Spinoza, one of his core recommendations is we have to understand the basis of our passions. We have to understand rationally why it is we have certain emotions and certain drives. If we're going to be aligning our conduct in a fashion that satisfies our desire to live with dignity and die in peace, that is to be virtuous, to be blessed in his use of terms. And this understanding, from my point of view, is ideally achieved empirically. And if we're going to ideally achieve it empirically, we have to develop robust representations of the world, which is where the big 4 come in. They govern how we develop those representations.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lawrence Krauss, a buddy of mine. You know who Krauss is? Lawrence Krauss?
Yeah, we've chatted before.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He has argued, and I think he's right, others have argued, actually Shermer and others have argued as well, that I'm somewhat maybe this is too big of a point or a question, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on it.
Let's hear it.
That philosophy has lost its way in a number of profound regards. It's it's not teaching graduate students, for example. Well, it's teaching them grad speak, and it's teaching them to go into ever more narrow areas about what Dan Dennett says matters of no abiding significance.
How many trans Chicana lesbians can dance on the head of a pin?
Yes. And it's been a mouthpiece to uphold the dominant moral orthodoxy. But even beyond all of those things, it doesn't teach people like how to read the methods of a study. It doesn't teach people why you ought to value evidence as opposed to unrestrained speculation about the origin of the universe, or a question that I've been fascinated by for a long time is the academic superstition that there can be no infinite regress, which seems to me to be silly, or silly that it's held with such tenacity. But I think the lack of grounding philosophy in empirical evidence in the most applied of ways shows me that the discipline has gone off the rails.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time.
Or is that too harsh?
I mean, I definitely agree with the spirit of what you're saying, and I'm thinking of how people will try to counter that, and kind of the way I think about it is what you're describing, naturalism. I understand naturalism to be exactly what you're saying should be the case, which is that our speculative inquiries, the role of philosophy is to engage in the clarification of our understanding of our representations of the world. Conceptual clarification. That's philosophy's job, according to the naturalist. The philosopher listens to whatever the scientists have to say about, oh, hey, we discovered such and such thing. Then the philosopher integrates that information and thinks about, okay, what are the different ways we can understand this? How can we maybe guide empirical inquiry to be more fruitful?
That's like the way you describe. That's like philosophy when it's done best.
Yeah. But unfortunately, not everybody is a naturalist. Not everybody places method prior to ontology and epistemology, the way I do and the way naturalists generally do. The more classical way of doing things is you start with speculation about what exists or what can be known, and then from there you constrain the field of what science can be. And in a lot of cases, this also includes morally what science can be, what science is allowed to talk about if science doesn't want any trouble.
Is there anything problematic about not being a naturalist?
I mean, I'm a naturalist, so I'm very, very much inclined towards saying yes, but...
Why? What would be wrong with not being a naturalist? And what is a naturalist, first of all?
A naturalist is somebody who places methodology prior to epistemology and prior to ontology. It's basically you adopting the attitude of, I operate. And putting off to the side for the moment, metaphysicians will be like, "Oh, you just use the word I, so you shut up, you guys." I didn't come into the world with a metaphysic. I just started doing shit as a baby. I started observing things. I started, I cognitive modalities, which I was not aware of because I didn't know what evolution was at the time. I didn't know what neuroscience was at the time. They were already in operation, and they were in operation in a certain way because they evolved to be that way. They were pieced together that way physiologically in the womb. I started developing representations of the world, and from these representations, I eventually developed a philosophy. My methodology, my organization of sense data eventually led me to the creation of these speculative models.
Okay, so now we've got naturalism. What is differentiate for me naturalism with methodological naturalism?
I mean, there's some people who will say that the thing that I just described is
methodological naturalism.
Yeah, it's just methodological. I use the term interchangeably with naturalism.
Oh, do you?
There are people who will say that naturalism means that you presuppose that the only things that exist are natural, which, what does that mean? It could mean it's just physical.
That's how I use the term, by the way.
Yeah. I use it the other way. I use it methodologically.
So, okay, so if there were a supernatural realm, how would you know?
I would use the evidence of my senses.
So you'd know naturalistically?
Yeah. What I would do is I would do what Quine recommends and basically compartmentalize different ontologies. So there's the natural, there's the supernatural, there's the super duper natural, the super duper duper natural, the super pooper scooper natural, whatever, however many supernaturals you want.
Right.
And I'd put them in this category and that category. My placing them in these categories is going to be a function of certain properties that they have. But at the end of the day, my knowledge of them is acquired naturalistically.
Okay, so if your knowledge of the properties is acquired naturalistically, and there could be properties that a supernatural realm has, like I'm thinking about angels and that ontology, that your senses cannot apprehend, then you could never know those, but yet you deny the supernatural.
Yeah, I do what Hume recommends. I commit it to the flames.
Okay, so you commit it to the flames. I mean, I'm thinking of Kant and the noumenal and noumena. Like, why?
Because it makes literally no difference to my life whether angels exist or not. If I can't apprehend the consequences of their existence, either directly or indirectly, then what difference does it make whether they exist in some metaphysical realm or not?
Well, but you think about free will, right? That makes no difference to your life.
Sure.
So why would you pick and choose one thing rather than another?
Oh, are you saying that like I believe in free will, which I don't have evidence for, but
No. So I guess I was kind of trying to find a special pleading there.
Okay.
I'm not sure I could. I'm just.
Let's try to formulate it together. How would the special pleading look in the case of free will?
Well, if you think about free will and there's nothing you can do about it either way, then why think about it? But why wouldn't the same argument apply to the supernatural?
I mean, I could think about it, I could speculate it, but it doesn't have to be admitted into my ontology.
Right. In fact, it can't be admitted into your ontology in a sense, because by definition it's supernatural. You wouldn't know what you were admitting into the ontology.
No, there would have to be some consequences of its existence. This isn't to say that, there are things I can posit, right? There are things that I don't have to interact with directly. They can be embedded in theories that do have observable consequences, like your mind, for example. I don't have any direct access to your mind.
Thank God.
But I do have access.
Sorry, go ahead.
You're good. I do have access to the consequences of your mind.
All right. Some of them.
Some of them. Right. And I can organize these consequences into a representation of the world that allows me to navigate it in accordance with those 4 criteria that I keep bringing up.
Right.
So if angels did accomplish something...
that's not supernatural, that's naturalistic.
That's naturalistic, but the key here is I haven't directly interacted with your mind. I can't do that. I've posited your mind. I posit a lot of things. I posit wave functions. I posit singularities. These things could all be bullshit. They might not necessarily be true. Nevertheless, I commit them to my ontology because they're embedded within my system, within my web of knowledge.
Okay. So
if free will worked like that, if I could posit that free will, the belief in free will, or whatever it is I conceptualize as free will, what I mean by free will could be different from what somebody else believes.
Yeah.
If I can embed that within a representation of the world that satisfies those criteria to a superior degree than somebody else's representation of the world, then as far as I'm concerned, I'm justified in believing in free will.
Okay, so relate that back to the Spinozistic conception of meaning, the 4 categories.
Sure. So Spinoza is recommending that to live a blessed life, we have to be able to understand the irrational basis of our desires and our drives. We have to understand our irrationality rationalistically. I would argue you have to understand them empirically. You can't, the contemplation is important, thinking about, but you have to work with something. You have to have some empirical grounding, and I believe that evolutionary biology and neuroscience is the field from which you extract that. And once you have a sufficiently robust understanding of those cognitive modalities which compel us to want to have meaning, we can make use of certain technologies. technologies like religion, or invent a new technology that fulfills religion's function, or that fills nationalism's function, or whatever. We can use these technologies, these social technologies, to help address the meaning crisis.
Okay, so why do we need grounding at all? And if we don't have a grounding, we have no meaning?
You can have sources of meaning without grounding, but then you're going to be believing in bullshit. Then you're going to be committing yourself to all kinds of things that either traditionally have given people meaning in the past, or which right now people are seeking out sources of meaning that don't have that empirical grounding.
So is knowledge possible without grounding?
Do you mean that like in a foundationalist?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not a foundationalist, but I think, maybe it'll help if I clarify kind of how my epistemology works.
Yeah.
So you're probably familiar with Susan Hack, her whole
Yeah, I know Susan. Yeah, she's.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're the second person I met who knows her.
My friend chased her around the room with a gun shaped like a penis.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I've never had the honor.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but basically you have these two different types of structures for epistemology. You could have foundationalism. I start with a basic set of beliefs and then I derive everything from those. Or you could have coherentism. I have a network of beliefs and justification is found exclusively within that network. There's no source of justification outside of my network of beliefs. Yeah. Susan Hack conceptualizes foundherentism, an ugly neologism that combines the two. And in this one...
Yeah, it is a nasty neologism, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
I mispronounced that, didn't I?
Yeah, it's just fine. It's just an ugly word.
Yeah.
Neologism is like you take two words and you stick them together. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, just like foundherentism.
Yeah.
But basically, she's saying that you can combine these two types of structures in such a fashion that you can have a source of justification that comes from outside of the network of beliefs, namely through empirical inquiry. But so in that case, it's not coherentism. But at the same time, there's no belief within this network of beliefs that is without justification. There is no foundation. All of these beliefs, to some degree, apply some amount of justification to all of the rest. So now you can...
that would be the neologism, wouldn't it? Yeah, so it would be... So you couldn't take away... I guess in coherentism, when you take away one node of belief, the rest fill up. It's like it's like a neural net when it...
It depends which belief, Peter.
But which belief presupposes that the coherent structure is itself predicated on some kind of a foundation, right?
The structure can be modified as beliefs come and go, right? I mean, like it's like this building. If I remove one beam, the entire structure is not going to collapse.
So it's like an architectonic structure. So that's interesting. So let me just throw this out because I just had the thought because I was thinking about that ugly neologism. God, really, it truly is ugly. Yeah. But I was thinking about it in terms of gravity. Mm-hmm. But if you took a coherentist network of belief in a 0G and you removed one of the nodes and the other nodes and connectors grew back or replaced that, then you wouldn't really need to think about it in terms of an architectonic structure or something having gravity.
Yeah. You can imagine this building floating in space, right? So we remove the concept of foundations altogether.
Yeah.
If I remove one of the beams, does the whole thing fly apart?
No.
No. So, but at the same time, there are some beams that are more important than others, right? They're not equally weighted. The load is not distributed evenly.
They'd be thicker, maybe, to extend the idea.
Yeah. They're gonna be some beliefs that if you remove them, they'll have more devastating consequences for the network.
And maybe that's because they have more auxiliary connectors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you see this actually in scientific theories. Most of the time, normal science, as Thomas Kuhn described it, you're adding or you're taking away little bits and pieces. With paradigm shifts, you're taking away fundamental things that require you to reorganize the entire structure.
I remember when I first read The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, I was like, wow, that's the coolest freaking thing. And then I read Feyerabend's stuff, and I'm like, wow, then he really went out to La La Land.
Yeah. Feyerabend was, I don't know whether to take him seriously half the time. The guy, I heard he was a prankster. Like he when he was at Berkeley, when he had tenure, he would just not show up to lecture his students. And he got away with it because he was world famous and also it was Berkeley.
Yeah, he had I heard that he had like 5 minutes of office hours a week and kept his door closed.
Yeah, that
sounds like it. Okay, so something I've been interested in a long time, and we touched on it, but I really want to drill down on it if it's okay with you.
Let's hear it.
I've been really curious about the relationship between, and you probably know my view on this. If not, I can either keep my cards close to my chest or not if you want.
Okay.
The relationship between not even a robust epistemology, but and I'm hesitant to say a true epistemology, but an epistemology that helps one align one's cognitions in a lawful way to reality in the best possible way. Maybe the creation of a new language to enable those extra linguistic hooks to things, to reality, or some like extraordinary epistemology, and what the relationship of that is to morality. And I think, just as a kind of way to think about it, let's say that one had a terrible epistemology, and let's say that, like every morning you got up just in a pedestrian sense and you flipped coins to figure out what you should do, or you asked your cat, or you sacrificed a goat on the hood of your car or something like that. Would there be a relationship between having a terrible epistemology and being moral? And if you said yes to that, and I'm not saying you're saying yes, well, what's your answer to that?
My answer is same as before. It's a multivariable equation.
Okay, so I don't think it is. Tell me why you think it is.
Because you can have a person with a shitty epistemology who still behaves morally, and you can have a person with a great epistemology who still behaves shittily. At the end of the day...
Oh, I love that word, shittily. Yeah, all right, go ahead.
At the end of the day, your decision to conduct yourself one way or another is not a function of your propositional attitudes. It's a function of different cognitive modalities.
Okay, so wait a second now. So I'm going to give you a counterexample to that, this hypothetical world that we're creating.
Okay.
So I will claim that what you claim is true only if one's epistemology is merely shitty.
All right.
If it's truly terrible, what you claim doesn't work.
All right.
Because like if you lived in a society that happened to latch on to good moral norms, whatever we want to say, society X. But your epistemology, the way that you governed yourself was you only follow them on Tuesday. And every Thursday you flip a coin to figure out what you should do.
Okay.
Then your epistemology would take you away from your morality. It would prevent you from being a good person. But the moment you admit that there are some epistemologies that take you away from morality, then that must mean that there are some epistemologies that bring you toward morality, no?
I think that your decision as to what to believe to be true is a different type of proposition than your decision of how to conduct yourself. I think the disagreement comes down to the is-ought gap.
But a poor epistemology overrides any moral dimension of one's life. In fact, it throws one off the train tracks.
Let's think about it.
Or am I thinking about it wrong?
Well, let's consider the contrapositive. Let's say I have an outstanding epistemology.
Okay.
And I encounter a person in the world who I deeply, deeply hate.
Yeah.
Pull out a gun and I shoot him.
Yeah.
My epistemology had nothing to do with my decision to shoot him. When I chose to shoot him, it wasn't a propositional attitude that governed that decision. What governed that decision were emotional drives. There are other cognitive modalities at play.
Right. So the emotional drives that caused you to kill the person, that begs the question, though, if one has a wonderful or fantastic, I'm struggling for what the word would be, but a precise or a highly accurate epistemology, if that would necessarily override, like the Greeks call it akrasia, weakness of will, or if it would override other social
No, because
you don't think so?
I don't think so, because I think that there are different competing modalities involved, right? The different parts of our brain, they're not seamlessly integrated in a way that's optimized for the acquisition of truth or for the performance of virtue, as evidenced by the world we live in. These things will frequently come into conflict with each other, And having a robust development of one of these things does not necessarily mean that you're going to have a robust development of the other.
Okay, let me give you a story that lends to your point, and then I'll tell you why that story is insufficient.
Okay.
I knew a guy who was one of the smartest people. Like, he was legit smart.
Okay.
And he has a PhD from Pitt in philosophy of science. And he published in epistemology, he taught epistemology, et cetera. And he was a diabetic who smoked. Mm-hmm. So that would seem to lend something to your working hypothesis or your statement that there's no necessary relationship between the two.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this then.
One can inform the other, right? But developing one will not necessarily lead to the development of the other.
And do you think that that's true in the extreme? Like, if I don't know, I guess I'm thinking about demigods. I guess I'm thinking about a race of superior or extremely technologically sophisticated and advanced beings who've developed hyper-robust epistemologies. And I guess I'm also thinking about whether or not the development of a robust epistemology would necessarily mean that one also developed a morally robust epistemology.
What do you mean by morally robust epistemology? Do you mean like a robust moral framework?
No, because you could have a moral framework that doesn't hook to reality. Mm-hmm. An epistemology that enables one to capture moral facts in a linguistic framework through language, in other words.
Mm-hmm. So help me understand the demigod situation. How does that inform your thinking on this?
In the same way that someone who had a truly terrible epistemology, like genuinely believed flipping coins, I guess that's not even truly terrible. Like, but something that was just so arbitrary plus capricious.
It gives me the warm fuzzies, therefore it's true.
Yeah, but it has to have some relationship of being capricious. Like, I guess one day your mood changed. In other words, you couldn't just figure out what gave you the warm fuzzies and then do the opposite of it. Mm-hmm. Like, it would have to have some element of randomness in the system.
So a random, for every decision that can be conceptualized as a binary moral decision, one or the other, you have a random number generator. If the random number is even, then you do one thing. If it's odd, you do the other.
Yeah. Okay. So let's operate with that. So if that causes one to make bad decisions, and let's say you use the same framework for one's moral decisions, mm-hmm. well, what if you, and if this doesn't make any sense, let me know. Wouldn't a demigod or someone with an extraordinarily, with an epistemology that hooked to reality with regard to moral facts, they would know what to do morally? Would that increase the likelihood that they would do it?
So help me clarify this. For the random number generator, does this pertain to their epistemology or to their conduct?
It would have to pertain to their epistemology. And let's say there's a lawful relationship between what they think they should do and what they actually do.
Okay. I would contend that lawful relationship in practice doesn't actually exist. I think that's like the core of our disagreement. I think you presuppose, or perhaps you have good reason for believing, that knowledge of how the world works and how we ought to conduct ourselves is going to necessarily govern our behavior at some level.
So, a cousin question. So do you think extremely sophisticated technological civilizations, do you think there's any relationship between those civilizations and the moral dictates or edicts that run through the societies?
I think that they'll have whatever works for them evolutionarily. There are going to be certain drives and certain passions that are going to facilitate their social norms in one direction or another, kind of just depending on their physiology and the environment.
Okay, do you believe the moral arc tends towards justice?
No.
Okay, well then, because I was going to ask you if you thought the moral arc tended toward justice, I was going to ask you if that's a phenomenon that you think holds for everything from emergent species to anything subject to an evolutionary mechanism or naturalistic selection.
No,
but you don't believe that.
I believe the moral arc tends toward fitness.
Explain.
I think that morality in a civilization is ultimately, what that civilization considers to be moral is ultimately going to be a function of what helps it adaptively. If pillaging your neighbors and raping their women and killing all the men, taking the children as slaves, if that helps your society propagate in a given time and place, then you're going to end up doing better than the civilization, which is all about meekness and kindness and doesn't do that.
Are you buying the idea that it is rational to be moral?
I believe that morality is going to be a function of evolutionary and social pressures. An alien civilization, what they think of as morality is not necessarily going to be the same as what we think of as morality. And I think that it will be rational to whatever degree. How do I put this? You're going to have certain drives, you're going to have certain passions, and you can adhere to these passions in a way that are in line with how that morality evolved, or you can have a misalignment. You can have a misalignment between how you conduct yourself and what's good for your social group, for the propagation of your genes. Shit, I lost where I was going with this.
No, that's fine. So, okay. So let's go back to the 4-quadrant thing. Mm-hmm. So this is going to sound like a weird question, but could you pull up the 4-quadrant model for us, please? So this is going to sound like a stupid question, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. To get there, you would need language. Like, you couldn't have some pre-linguistic tribe intuit any of this.
Intuit this model or make use of this? Because
yeah, there's an important distinction. Go ahead.
Yeah, because everybody is using this, whether they're aware of this or not. This is just how certain aspects of our cognition are organized. We have to be able to organize our sense data in ways that produces representations of the world that adheres to this criteria. Otherwise, we're
even internal consistency. That's the one that I have problems with
to a degree. So let's say, for example, I'm walking down a hiking trail, right?
Yeah.
And I perceive the hissing of a nearby snake.
Yeah.
I perceive it simultaneously to be to my left and to my right.
Yeah.
Now suddenly I don't know which direction to go because I've simultaneously taken on these two contradictory propositions. The snake is to my left, the snake is to my right.
So you go backward or forward is what you're going to say.
Okay. I mean, if my only choice is left or right,
okay,
then this is going to compromise my fitness. And so I'm not, again...
so it really is an adaptation for you.
Yeah. These criteria... Yeah, there's a subtlety here. We're not optimally adapted for any of this. None of our cognitive modalities are optimally adapted. Whether it's our perception of our environment or our drives to pursue meaning. I mean, if they were optimally adapted, you wouldn't see humanity the way that it is.
Vervaeke makes that point, doesn't he?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this operational criteria of science. Mm-hmm. This is rationally derivable.
It's empirically
observable.
I would claim that the evidence suggests this. I would claim that if you look into the literature of biological cognition and evolutionary neuroscience, and you apply a naturalistic philosophy to try to make sense of all of this, you end up with an understanding of how it is we go about developing our representations of the world.
All right. Well, since you've been such a good sport today, and you've indulged my fantasies about talking about alien civilizations, I'm going to continue with this. Is the 4-quadrant model you have something that is applicable to if there were intelligent life in the universe, would that be applicable to them as well?
That's a very good question. I would claim that Darwinism, and I'm using that term broadly, it's a more general phenomenon than just biology, I think, or sorry, than just biology on Earth. But there's a sense of informational Darwinism as well. There's a sense of cosmic Darwinism. When we're talking about Darwinism in this more general sense, what we're really talking about is a filtration mechanism, a means by which you sort out the crap and leave behind whatever is optimally, for lack of a better term, adapted to a given environment, be it informational, be it at the cosmic scale.
Variation and selection?
Yeah, variation and selection. There's an evolutionary algorithm that it's almost metaphysical. You could, if you derive a metaphysic from this branching structure that Darwin envisions, you can imagine a situation in which alien civilizations, they develop under entirely nitrogen-based life forms, for example, instead of carbon-based life forms. They would still have to adhere to something like this. They would still have to adhere to the big four because they have to represent. They have to generate representations of their environment. They're going to have to undergo an evolutionary process. There is going to be adaptation and selection, and ultimately the cognitive modalities that are going to be produced, they're going to be the ones that do a better job than all of their rivals in terms of navigating their environments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm thinking about two things. I'm thinking about a piece I wrote with Scientific American with Victor Stenger and James Lindsay about models and model-dependent realism in the history of the philosophy of science. And I'm thinking about how. Okay, so relate the operational criteria of science to models, and
So I use generally the word model synonymously with representation. So a picture in your head of your environment, or if not of your environment, then some subject, maybe the structure of a cell, right? I guess if you wanted to, we could differentiate representation from model in that way. Representation is whatever I'm perceiving at any given time. It's my navigation of this environment. It could as well. Just navigation, right? Just me keeping track of my immediate surroundings and being able to respond to stimuli. And then model the things that I posit or the things that I don't directly engage with. I don't directly engage with the structure of a cell. I have to conceptualize it in a more abstract, secondhand way. If you wanted to make that distinction, you could, but I would claim that these things exist in continuity with each other. Our formation of the latter, that representation of what the structure of a cell looks like, it applies the same principles as the ones we use when representing our immediate surroundings, only to a more strict degree. They adhere to the big four criteria to a more strict degree than when we apply them just to represent our environment.
Do you think it would be more conducive to society's flourishing if we had more smart people who are less kind, or more kind people who are less smart?
I would answer again it's a multivariable equation. It would depend on the ways in which they're kind versus the ways in which they're smart.
Would you rather be friends with someone who's smart and not kind, or kind and not smart?
I have both kinds of friends, and when I'm in different moods, I might prefer one versus another. If I want more intellectual stimulation and I don't care so much about, social bonding and solidarity, I'll go to my asshole friends who are smart. But when I want the other thing, when I want a connection with somebody at maybe a less intellectual level, then I'll go to my dumb friends.
Would you rather be in love with someone who's kind or smart?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Empirically, it's the evidence says that people tend to seek out partners who have a similar degree of intelligence. People's drives lead them to do that. Isn't necessarily good for them. Could be,
so what's your answer to the question?
For me personally, I've never dated a person who was unintelligent.
Could you?
I don't see how it's possible.
Let me ask you another question, if I may. Let's say that you met are you straight?
Yeah.
Let's say that you met a woman who was just extraordinarily intelligent, like way smarter than you, and amazing at every level. And she broke up with you.
Yeah.
And you went on a bunch of dates and you tried to find someone with similar qualities or what have you, and you couldn't. Would you then eschew the whole nature of finding someone who's smart because everybody would stand in comparison?
I think at that point I would become a philosopher, because that is the fate of so many philosophers. I think it happened to Nietzsche. He used to travel with that one Russian chick.
Yeah.
It happened. I know Hume threatened to commit suicide over a woman, but I don't know if she was smart. Knowing him, she probably was very smart. So,
If you could take a pill that would turn you gay, would you do it?
that's an interesting question. I'm going to say no because I want to have my own kids.
If you could take a pill that would make you 10% smarter, but 20% shorter, would you do it?
That's a very good question. If I was 10% smarter and 20% shorter, perhaps I could become a billionaire, in which case my height doesn't matter.
True. I guess it matter for what?
For finding a date.
Yeah. Well, that would certainly be true.
Yeah. No, I don't think I would take it, because there are other dimensions to my life other than my intelligence.
Like what?
There's my social life. There's my romantic life. I mean,
What's important to you in your social life?
I mean, connection is important. I'd like to be able to, have friends who I can.
Do you play Dungeons and Dragons?
I do not. Why?
Well, because Reed and I play Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to play. We played at this table right here.
Hey, if this is an invitation, I'm always up for learning.
Would you like to come and play with us?
Absolutely.
Excellent. I really like that openness. So let me ask you another question. I'm going to throw you a curveball question right now.
Okay.
Do you think it's important for people to develop a physical excellence?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I would definitely endorse it. I mean, I used to be extremely unfit myself, and it just feels good, being able to do things with your body that you.
Do you have a physical excellence? Or are you working on one?
I'm working on it.
What are you working on?
I'm trying to get down to 10% body fat and an intermediate level of lifting.
10% body fat that's pretty good. I wonder what I am. Yeah, 10% is pretty good.
You should get a DEXA scan.
Oh, I actually had one of those a while ago. Actually, here in LA, I had one of those a while ago.
We got a few of those around here.
Yeah, that's a medically certified, that's like a federally certified thing. And so it's I'd have to take a look and see what mine was. Can't remember. Is your health important to you?
Yeah.
Would you rather have a mental health crisis or a physical crisis? Assuming, and I know that's a very broad question.
Yeah. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I'll give you the justification, but not the answer.
All right, you have any questions for me about literally anything?
Yeah. What are you up to these days? What have you been working on recently?
I've been thinking a lot about reading about friendship in the little time I have. My next book is about that. I got to fix up my other book I wrote a children's book, but it needs a lot of work. Reed and I are about to go to Taiwan, and we're traveling around the world. Reed in particular is developing the street epistemology stuff.
Nice.
I'm just thinking a lot about friendship, which is one of the reasons I ask you some of those questions.
It's very important. It's one of the things that's contributing, or one of the things that's driving the meaning crisis. People are atomized.
Completely agree. And the current culture war has made the situation far, far worse. And I've lost some really good friends,
Yeah.
which has been devastating to me.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about that. And when you think about that, I've been trying to do a different type of work. So the work that Reed and I do is like completely consumes me. I mean, it's just from the moment I get up. But the impact of the culture war has been devastating to personal friendships.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Believe me, I know.
Yeah. You've lost friends?
Of course.
About what are people upset with you about?
I mean, in my own personal life, which I keep distinct from the King Crocoduck life, I have been fairly vocal about my opposition to social justice nonsense, and particularly as it pertains to law enforcement.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something totally different. You mean like the defund the police idiocy?
Yeah. And in 2020, during the mostly peaceful protests, I did lose a decent number of friends. Do you think? Okay, so do you think those people were? My grandmother used to use a phrase. I haven't heard it used in literally decades. Have you heard the phrase "fair weather friends"? Tell me.
I think it means like they're friends in good weather, but when the weather's bad, they're not friends anymore.
Yeah. I think the expression I like to use is the trash has a way of taking itself out.
Yeah.
You treasure your old feelings and old connections, and it's complex because on the one hand you treasure those memories, but on the other hand they become soured by what follows when the friendship ends. I think that the best way to manage these kinds of feelings, because it's just an inevitable part of life.
Yeah, and when there is some difficulty, then the friends go away.
Yeah.
And so, but wouldn't then the idea be that they were never your friends to begin with?
No, you can't do that.
Okay, so this is something I'm struggling with. So why not?
Because what you're doing is you're taking your complex three-dimensional experiences and you're flattening them into a one-dimensional black and white simulacrum.
Yeah.
This habit of mind, as Hume would say, he wouldn't say it specifically in this context, but Hume's belief, which has been borne out by empirical evidence, especially with cognitive behavioral therapy, is that the impressions that you form and the habits of mind that you cultivate ultimately dictate how you go about conceptualizing the world. And when you flatten the world into this black and white simulacrum, you condemn yourself to a habit of mind in which everything is bleak and terrible, and you become, to borrow a phrase from Schopenhauer, tormentor and tormented are one.
Yeah.
You become your own worst enemy because you create a nightmarish reality that it doesn't have to be that way. So I would invite people in your position to embrace the complexity and to accept these difficult emotions and manage them by just accepting the complexity of reality and sitting with those feelings.
So let me ask you a question, another curveball question. You've done so well about tolerating my curveball questions.
I enjoy them.
If I had a pill and I slid a pill across the table right now, and that pill gave you eternal life, literally forever, even if the planet blows up, or we don't. Obviously, neither one of us know what's going to happen in the future.
Right.
You could not die. You ever watch the Highlander? And those dudes run around chopping off their own. Do you ever watch that?
I did not.
Oh God,
I know.
It's truly a shame. Okay, anyway,
You're Gen X, right?
What am I reading? Millennial? I'm X. I don't know what I am. I'm not a boomer though. I missed that by a few years. But anyway,
I'm a younger millennial, so is this to be expected?
Okay. So
I'll play Dungeons and Dragons with you, though.
Okay. Well, we accept. You'd be exceptionally good at it. It's my intuition. Okay. Would you take the pill?
It's a good question. I want to say yes because I'm terrified of dying, but I want to say no because I'm terrified of suffering, and that's a one-way ticket.
Okay. Let's say that you would be healthy forever, but you could be in the.
There are other ways to suffer.
Right. Okay. Because I was going to say, like, you could be in the voids of space if we killed ourselves for eons.
I'm floating by myself, and
I've basically an eternity.
Yeah, and I've lost my mind. That doesn't sound like
a fun time.
No. I would accept relief under if the choice is between those two. You can't. I wouldn't take it.
If you could have any one physical excellence for free without working for it, what would it be?
One physical excellence for free without working for it. In terms of like my ability to
do whatever you want, you tell me. Not like flying, because that's not a physical excellence.
Yeah, you mean like what type of workout I would?
Well, no, I mean like I don't know, it'd be like the world champion kickboxer.
Oh.
Or something, or a flamenco dancer or something.
I don't know. I'm content with working for physical excellence because once you get to a point of physical excellence, it's not the end of the game. It's the beginning. the process of getting to physical excellence cultivates the habits which allow you to sustain that physical excellence. So if I didn't work for it, I would soon lose it.
Would you rather lose an eye or a leg?
These are very good questions. Probably an eye. I don't really need depth.
Really? I'm surprised by that. I would pick a leg.
I think I would make an eye patch work.
Is there anyone living on the earth right now you're willing to die for?
Yeah.
Can I ask who? You don't have to answer the question if it makes you uncomfortable.
Maybe we'll pass on to the next one.
Okay. You have any questions for me?
What about you? Anyone on earth you would die for?
Yeah. Few people.
Are they in the room with us right now?
I wouldn't die for Reed.
Okay.
I'd tell you what I would do. I'd give an eye for Reed or an arm or a leg. But I don't think I'd quite die. Well, I might die for him, given that I'm older than he is. Yeah, I might. As long as it would be quick, I might. I would seriously consider if it were quick. If I had to be tortured for months, I don't think I'd die for Reed.
Well, it sounds like you're not a fair weather friend to him. So Reed, hold on to this guy.
There you go, Reed. There you go. Anything else?
That sounds like a decent note to end on, right?
All right. Well, yeah, I'm good. Well, I appreciate you coming and talking to me and talking to us and hanging out.
Thank you for having me. It's been a really, really stimulating conversation.
Oh, cool. I appreciate that, man. Thanks. Where can people find you?
They can find me on YouTube under the username King Crocoduck. I haven't uploaded in a while, but that'll be changing soon. They can also find me on Twitter. Again, just look for King Crocoduck. And yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Reed. Thank you for watching. Everything we do is under the umbrella of the National Progress Alliance, nationalprogressalliance.org. It's a nonprofit, independent 501c3. Your generous donations keep us going and keep fueling content like this. So please help us out. Make a donation. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.